My hands trembled, but it wasn't from fear. It was pure, unfiltered excitement. The knot of my tie felt a little too tight, and I tugged at it, a useless gesture. Today was the day. After 2 years of sleepless nights and sacrificed weekends, Project Chimera was finally ready. "You good?" I looked up. Marcus, my best friend and manager, stood there with 2 cups of coffee, a wide grin splitting his face. He passed one to me. "Never been better," I said, my voice buzzing. "This is it." He clapped me hard on the back, nearly making me spill the hot liquid. "Ready to be a hero, Leo." I took a sip, the warmth steadying me. A genuine smile spread across my face, the first in days that wasn't fueled by caffeine. "Only if you're right there with me. We did this, man, together." "Always," he promised, his eyes glinting with the same fire I felt in my chest. "Now let's go blow their minds." In the boardroom, the air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and quiet expectation. Mr. Harrison, the CEO, sat at the head of the table, his face an unreadable mask. I took a deep breath and began. "Good morning, everyone. Project Chimera isn't just an update, it's a revolution." My voice was steady, confident. I moved through the slides, explaining the intricate architecture, the elegant lines of code I'd woven together from nothing. My creation. My baby. The board members leaned in, their expressions shifting from skepticism to intrigue. I felt a surge of pride. This was my moment. After 20 minutes, I nodded to my partner. "And now, Marcus will walk you through the market integration and potential." "Thank you, Leo," he said, stepping forward. "As my brilliant partner has outlined." He started strong, using the notes we'd rehearsed 100 times. But then he began to drift. He started rephrasing my technical explanations, subtly claiming them as his own insights. "As I discovered during the initial coding phase," he'd say. Or, "when I designed the core algorithm." My smile faltered. I shifted in my seat, a cold knot forming in my stomach. He was using my phrases, my analogies. At first, I thought he was just nervous, leaning on the way I'd explained it to him countless times. But he kept going, his voice growing bolder, painting a picture where he was the sole architect and I was merely a helper. I wanted to stand up, to shout, "That was me!" I did that, but I was frozen, my throat tight. This had to be a misunderstanding. He wouldn't do this. Not Marcus. Then he clicked to the next slide and my world shattered. It was one I had never seen before. A stark, blood-red screen with 3 words in bold white letters. "Critical security flaw." A collective gasp filled the room. Mr. Harrison shot up from his chair. "What in God's name is this, Marcus?" Marcus turned to the CEO, his face a perfect, solemn mask of regret. His voice was heavy, laced with false disappointment. "Sir, it's a backdoor in the core encryption. I found this just last night, digging through the final build." He paused, then looked at me, a flicker of something cold in his eyes. "It seems Leo's oversight could have cost us millions. It could have destroyed the company." Every eye in the room swiveled to me. The air crackled with accusation. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. My mind was a deafening roar of static. "No, no, no. That's not possible. I checked everything." "Is this true?" Mr. Harrison's voice was a low growl. He wasn't looking at Marcus. He was staring directly at me, his face turning a furious shade of purple. "No, I don't understand," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "The code was clean. Enough," he bellowed, slamming his fist on the table. He pointed a trembling finger at me, his knuckles white. "You're fired. Security will escort you out. Get out of my sight. Now." The walk back to my desk was the longest of my life. The sound started as a low hiss of whispers. "I can't believe it." All that work down the drain. He seemed so confident. Then the hiss turned into a snicker. Someone from sales, I think. Then another, louder this time. By the time I reached my desk and grabbed an empty cardboard box, the room was echoing with open, mocking laughter. They were laughing at my failure, my utter humiliation. I fumbled with the box, my hands shaking for a different reason now. Shame. It was a hot, heavy blanket suffocating me. I glanced up one last time, my eyes drawn to the glass walls of the boardroom. Marcus stood there, watching me go. He had his hand over his mouth, his brow furrowed in that perfect mask of concern. But his eyes were cold, triumphant. He had won. The silence was the loudest thing in my apartment. A week had passed, or maybe it was two. Time had blurred into a smear of gray dawns and long, dark nights. The curtains were drawn, choking the room in a perpetual dusty twilight. My phone would buzz on the coffee table, its screen lighting up with calls I had no energy to answer. Mom. Buzz. Vibrate. Silence. Kevin. Buzz. Vibrate. Silence. I just watched the names flash, phantom limbs from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. My own reflection stared back from the black mirror of the TV screen, a hollow-eyed stranger with a week's worth of stubble. The laughter from the office was a constant echo in my head, a phantom soundtrack to my new empty life. It followed me from the couch to the kitchen and back again. It was the only thing that kept me company, a cruel reminder of my public execution. I closed my eyes, but the darkness behind my lids was no escape. All I could see was him. Marcus. It wasn't the cold-eyed traitor from the boardroom. It was the Marcus from a year ago. After we'd pulled our first all-nighter on the Chimera prototype, we were sprawled on the cheap office floor, surrounded by a fortress of empty pizza boxes and energy drink cans. "You know," he'd said, his voice raspy with exhaustion as he stared at the acoustic tiles of the ceiling. "My dad always said business is a dog-eat-dog world, that there are no real friends in the game." "Is that what you think?" I'd asked, my own voice cracking. He turned his head on the carpet, his grin tired but completely genuine. "Nah, you're my brother Leo. For life. We're going to the top together, you and me." "For life," I'd repeated, and the words had felt like a vow. I opened my eyes, the memory turning to ash in my mind. He hadn't just stolen my project. He'd stolen my memories, methodically poisoning every good moment we'd ever shared until nothing clean was left. He'd murdered our past and left me to rot in the ruins. My brother. What a joke. I was a fool who'd built a future on a foundation of lies. My fingers moved on their own, scrolling numbly through the news feed on my laptop. Tech articles, stock market updates, celebrity gossip. It was all just white noise, a meaningless stream of data, until I saw his face. There he was, Marcus, smiling that $1,000,000 smile, one hand gripping the CEO's in a firm handshake, the other holding a glass of champagne. The headline was a punch to the gut. Marcus Vance, tech's newest visionary, launches revolutionary project Chimera. Visionary. The word burned my eyes, my vision, my code, my name for it. My hand was shaking as I clicked the article. The words swam in front of me, mocking me from the screen. A genius move by Vance, who single-handedly identified and corrected a critical flaw just hours before launch, saving the company from potential disaster. Hailed as a hero by CEO Harrison for his unwavering integrity and quick thinking. Hero? I could almost hear the clinking glasses, the self-congratulatory toasts. To Marcus, Mr. Harrison would be booming. The man who saved this company. To Marcus, the board would echo, their voices slick with admiration. They were celebrating on the grave of my career. My stomach churned, a bitter acid rising in my throat. I slammed the laptop shut, the sharp crack echoing like a gunshot in the silent room. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash something, but all I could do was sit there. You paralyzed, suffocating under the weight of his success. Just then, my phone buzzed again on the table. Another call to ignore, but it wasn't a call. The screen lit up with a text message from an unknown number. I almost deleted it without looking. Why bother? It would just be more pity. But my thumb hesitated over the trash icon. Curiosity, a long dormant instinct, stirred. I opened it. The message was short, just 9 words. They didn't deserve you. What he did was wrong. C. I stared at the letters. C. It took a moment to place it. Clara, the quiet junior dev from the back corner, the one who always wore headphones and seemed to live in her own world? It had to be. I read the message again. And again. It wasn't pity. It wasn't advice. It was just truth. Simple, clean, and undeniable. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the suffocating blanket of despair felt a little lighter. The laughter in my head didn't disappear, but another sound was joining it, a low, dangerous hum. The silence wasn't empty anymore. The ghost in the reflection looked back at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker in his dead eyes. It wasn't sadness. It was the first tiny glowing ember of rage, The black sedan idling outside my cramped apartment looked like a predator in a parking lot full of prey. I clutched my lukewarm coffee, watching a man in a charcoal suit step out. He didn't look like a debt collector. He looked like he owned the pavement he stood on. "Mr. Elias Thorne?" he asked, his voice as polished as his shoes. "Depends on who's asking," I replied, leaning against the doorframe. "If you're selling something, I'm fresh out of capital." He didn't smile. He simply handed me a heavy cream-colored card with a single name embossed in silver, Adrian Evans. "Mr. Evans will see you now. The car's waiting." "I don't know an Adrian Evans," I said, though the name felt like a phantom limb somewhere on the edge of my memory. "He was in the front row during your final presentation at G-Tech," the man said, opening the rear door. "He says you have nothing left to lose. He's right, isn't he?" I looked back at my darkened hallway, at the stack of past due notices on the counter. Fine, let's see what a billionaire wants with a ghost. The drive was silent. We pulled up to a glass monolith that pierced the clouds, a structure that made my former office look like a hobbyist's workshop. I was ushered into a top-floor suite where the air smelled of expensive cedar and cold ambition. Adrian Evans sat behind a desk of petrified wood, his silhouette framed by the sprawling city below. "Sit, Elias," he said. His voice was a calm, sharp blade. I dropped into the leather chair, feeling small. "You went through a lot of trouble to fetch me, Mr. Evans." "Why?" "I watched you in that boardroom a month ago," he began, leaning into the light. "I saw the way you laid out the neural architecture. It was brilliant. It had your signature on every line of code. And yet, I was the one escorted out by security," I spat. "Because Marcus is a fool," Evans said simply. "A charismatic, loud-mouthed fool, but a fool nonetheless. He's been running your company into the ground with his arrogance for 30 days. Have you seen the ticker today?" I stopped checking the stock price when it stopped being my problem. "It fell another 6% this morning," Evans said, sliding a tablet across the desk. "He's bleeding talent. He's overpromising on a build he doesn't understand. He's a shark who forgot how to swim. Why tell me this? To twist the knife?" "No." Evans locked his eyes onto mine. They were the color of flint. "I'm offering you a choice. I own a venture firm that could place you in a senior role tomorrow. High 6 figures, full autonomy, a fresh start." I felt a spark of hope, but it was cold. "And the second choice?" "The second choice is the one you actually want." He smiled thinly. "I provide the capital. You provide the strategy. We execute a hostile takeover. We squeeze Marcus until he gasps. We tank the valuation, and then we buy back every single share of G-Tech for pennies on the dollar." I stood up, walking to the floor-to-ceiling window. Down there, somewhere in the gray grid, Marcus was likely sitting in my chair, drinking my scotch, and burning my life's work. My hands began to shake, not from fear, but from a sudden, violent clarity. "A hostile takeover takes years," I whispered. "With my money and your intimate knowledge of their vulnerabilities?" "We can do it in 6 months," Evans countered. "But you have to be willing to be the monster they already claim you are." "Forgiveness is a luxury, Elias. Can you afford it?" I looked at my reflection in the glass, superimposed over the city I helped build. The man looking back looked hungry. "Marcus took my reputation," I said, my voice hoarse and steady. "He took my father's legacy and turned it into a punchline. So, what is the play?" I turned back to him, the weight of the decision settling into my bones like lead. "I don't want a job at your firm, Mr. Evans. I want my seat back. I want the company. I want it all back." Evans stood, extending a hand across the desk. "Then let's go to war." The silence of the war was more deafening than any shouting match I'd ever had with Marcus. I sat in a sleek, windowless room provided by Adrian Evans, surrounded by monitors that displayed the slow, rhythmic bleeding of my former life. "You're staring again, Elias," Adrian said, walking in with 2 glasses of scotch. The numbers won't move faster just because you're burning holes in the screen with your eyes." "Every tick downward is a victory," I muttered, taking the glass. "How many shares did the shell company in Delaware pick up this morning?" "Another 2%, Adrian replied, leaning against the desk. "Marcus is practically giving them away. He just announced a restructuring plan that has the institutional investors terrified. He thinks he's trimming fat. He's actually cutting into the bone." I took a sip of the amber liquid. "He doesn't know how to build, Adrian. He only knows how to pose. I spent 10 years writing that code, and he thinks he can maintain it by firing the people who understand the architecture. My phone buzzed on the mahogany surface. It was a message from Clara. My heart hammered against my ribs as I read it aloud. "He just fired the entire quality assurance team," I said, a dark laugh escaping my throat. Clara says he called them unnecessary overhead during the morning stand-up. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Is he truly that short-sighted? Without QA, the Phoenix build will collapse under its own weight. He doesn't care about the weight, I replied. He cares about the quarterly margins. He's trying to inflate the numbers for a short-term bounce, but the bugs are already crawling out. Look at this. I pulled up another message from Clara. Phoenix is riddled with errors. The beta testers are screaming. Clients are threatening to pull their contracts. He's handing us the keys to the front door, Adrian mused. But we need to be careful. If he realizes someone is vacuuming up the stock, he might trigger a poison pill defense. He won't realize it, I said firmly. He's too busy doing an interview for Wired next week. He wants to be the face of the new G-Tech. He's so focused on the camera that he hasn't looked at the ledger in weeks. You've changed. Elias, Adrian noted, his eyes narrowing. 6 months ago, you were mourning a career. Now you talk like a shark. I had a good teacher, I said, looking back at the screens. Besides, I'm not just trading stocks. I'm reclaiming my property. Every book on corporate law you gave me, every lesson on hostile acquisitions, it's all just a different kind of syntax. I'm just debugging a broken system now. And Marcus is the biggest bug in the code. The board meeting is in 3 weeks, Adrian reminded me. That's when we reveal the position. We need to reach 40% ownership before then to have a blocking position. Can you handle the pressure until then? I've lived in a basement for a decade, making miracles happen on a shoestring budget, I said, standing up and pacing the small room. Keeping my mouth shut while Marcus digs his own grave is the easiest job I've ever had. Does he have any idea who's buying? None. To him, it's just market volatility. He actually told a reporter yesterday that the dip in stock price was an opportunity for loyal investors to show their faith. I shook my head. The arrogance is staggering. He really thinks he's untouchable. Everyone thinks they're untouchable until the floor drops out, Adrian said. And you, Elias, how does it feel to be the one pulling the lever? It feels cold, I admitted, staring at the ticker symbol for G-Tech. Cold and sharp. I thought I'd feel guilty, especially for the employees who are losing their jobs because of his mismanagement. But then I remember the look on his face when he told me I was easily replaceable. And now I'm the only one who can save the company from the mess he's made, I said, my voice dropping an octave. He's sitting on a throne, but the ground beneath him is turning to quicksand. Every time he moves, he sinks a little deeper, and I'm just standing on the bank watching him go under. 3 weeks, Elias, Adrian said, heading for the door. Don't blink. I won't, I promised, my eyes fixed on the red numbers. I haven't blinked in months. The velvet curtains of the grand ballroom were a deep, mocking red. I sat in the darkened suite upstairs, my eyes fixed on the live feed. My heart was a steady drum against my ribs, each beat counting down the seconds until the collapse of a kingdom. On the screen, Marcus paced the stage like a rock star, his tailored suit glowing under the spotlights. We are entering an era of unprecedented visionary leadership, Marcus announced, his smug smile plastered across the 50-foot projection behind him. G-Tech isn't just a company, it's the future, and I am the architect of that future. I leaned closer to the monitor. You're a thief in a nice tie, Marcus, I whispered to the empty room. Beside me, Adrian Evans checked his watch. He's laying it on thick. Look at the board members in the front row. They aren't smiling. They know the numbers don't match the rhetoric, I said, watching a board member wipe sweat from his brow. They can feel the ship sinking, even if the captain is busy singing. It's time, Adrian said, nodding to his lead counsel, Miller, who was positioned in the third row of the ballroom. On the screen, Miller stood up, his voice cutting through Marcus's rehearsed applause. Mr. Chairman, point of order. Under Article 4 of the corporate bylaws, we would like to call for an immediate vote of no confidence and a motion to install a new CEO representing the new majority shareholder group. The room went deathly silent. Marcus actually laughed into his microphone, the sound echoing harshly. Majority shareholder? That's ridiculous, Mr. Miller. My family and the board hold the controlling interest. Who is this mystery investor? Miller didn't flinch. He simply checked his phone and then gestured toward the back of the ballroom. He's here to speak for himself. Adrian looked at me. Go. Finish it. I stood up, adjusted my cuffs, and walked out of the suite. The hallway felt miles long. When I reached the heavy oak doors of the ballroom, I took one deep breath. I pushed them open with both hands. The light from the stage hit me first. As I walked down the center aisle, the laughter died in a slow, suffocating wave. 1,000 heads turned. I felt the weight of their collective shock, a physical pressure that would have crushed me 6 months ago. Now it felt like fuel. I saw the color drain from Marcus's face as I stepped into the light of the stage. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, his mouth hanging open, the microphone drooping in his hand. The board members who had once avoided my gaze now stared in a mix of disbelief and sheer terror. I climbed the stairs, the tap of my shoes the only sound in the cavernous room. I stopped 2 feet from Marcus. Up close, I could see the fine tremor in his jaw. "Leo," he stammered, his voice cracking. "What the hell is this? You can't be here. Security." "Security works for the person who signs the checks, Marcus," I said, my voice clear and terrifyingly calm. I reached out and wrapped my fingers around the microphone. For a second, he tried to hold on, but I jerked it away from his trembling hand. I turned to the crowd, looking out at the sea of faces, the people who had stayed silent while I was stripped of my life's work. "For those who don't remember me," I began, my voice amplified and strong, filling every corner of the hall. "My name is Leo. I spent a decade building the foundation of this company in a basement while most of you were at cocktail parties." I paused, letting the silence settle. "As of 8:30 this morning, a consortium led by my interests has acquired 42% of GTEC's outstanding shares. Combined with the institutional proxies we secured an hour ago, I now hold the majority vote." I looked directly at the chairman of the board. "The motion for a new CEO has passed by default." I turned back to face my old friend. Marcus was shaking now, his eyes darting toward the exits, looking for a way out of the reality he had created. "Leo, wait," he whispered away from the mic. "We can talk about this. I can make you a partner. We can fix the Phoenix build together." "You had your chance to be a partner, Marcus. You chose to be a king instead." I stepped back toward the podium, making sure the entire world heard my next words. "My first act as CEO is a simple one, intended to restore the integrity of this institution." I leaned in, my eyes locking onto his. "Marcus, you're fired. Get off my stage."